Right now, something historic is happening inside Iran, and the world is watching. For the past several days, the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, and dozens of other Iranian cities have been filled with protesters who are no longer afraid. Students, workers, women, young men, all of them coming out in numbers that the Islamic Republic has not seen in years. And this time, the regime is struggling to stop it. This is not just another protest wave. What we are seeing right now inside Iran is fundamentally different from everything that came before. The 2009 Green Movement was suppressed. The 2019 fuel protests were crushed with live ammunition. The 2022 Mahsa Amini uprising shook the regime but eventually faded. But today, in 2025, something has shifted. The people are angrier, they are more organized, and most importantly, they are no longer silent. So what exactly is happening? Let us break it down. It started at the universities. Iranian students, who have historically been at the forefront of political movements in the country, began gathering on campuses across the nation. They were not asking for small reforms. They were not requesting better economic conditions. They were calling for the end of the Islamic Republic itself. Chants that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago were being shouted openly, in daylight, in front of security cameras, in front of IRGC officers. The regime's response was immediate and brutal. Security forces moved into university campuses. Arrests were made. Students were dragged out of dormitories in the middle of the night. And yet, the protests did not stop. They grew. Within days, the movement had spread far beyond the university campuses. Workers from the oil sector joined. Bazaar merchants, who are traditionally considered a conservative and regime-supporting class, began closing their shops in protest. Teachers, nurses, and civil servants took to the streets. And in smaller cities and towns, places that the regime has always counted on for loyalty, people started coming out as well. This is the part that truly terrifies the Islamic Republic. The protests are no longer limited to young, educated, urban Iranians. They have gone nationwide. And when a movement becomes nationwide inside a country like Iran, the regime faces a crisis it cannot simply shoot its way out of. Now, let us talk about what is making this moment even more explosive, the international context. Iran right now is surrounded. The United States has deployed additional carrier strike groups in the region. Israel has been conducting operations that have directly weakened Iran's military capabilities and its network of proxy forces across the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon has been significantly degraded. Hamas in Gaza has been devastated. The so-called axis of resistance that Iran spent decades building and funding is now in serious trouble. And the Iranian people know this. They can see it. They understand that their government has been spending billions of dollars supporting proxy militias across the region, while ordinary Iranians struggle with 40% inflation, a collapsing currency, and unemployment rates that are among the highest in the region. The rial has lost so much of its value that middle-class families who owned homes and had savings just 5 years ago are now struggling to put food on the table. This is the economic reality that fuels the protests. People are not just angry at the ideology of the Islamic Republic. They are angry because their lives have gotten worse every single year. They are angry because they see their country's resources being wasted on foreign wars, while hospitals lack medicine and schools lack funding. And now, with Iran militarily weakened and economically devastated, the protests have found a new energy. People sense that the regime is vulnerable in a way it has never been before. Let us talk about Reza Pahlavi because his name has been coming up repeatedly in these protests. Reza Pahlavi is the son of the last Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was overthrown in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. For decades, Reza Pahlavi has lived in exile, largely in the United States. He has consistently spoken out against the Islamic Republic. And now, inside Iran, protesters are chanting his name and holding up images of his father. This is significant. The Islamic Republic has spent 46 years trying to erase the memory of the Pahlavi dynasty. They have rewritten history, destroyed monuments, and imprisoned anyone who publicly expressed sympathy for the monarchy. And yet, in 2025, his name is being chanted in the streets of Iranian cities. What does that tell you? It tells you that a significant portion of the Iranian population, particularly younger Iranians who never lived under the Shah, are so desperate for an alternative to the current regime that they are willing to embrace a figure who represents a completely different vision for Iran. Whether or not Reza Pahlavi will ever actually return to Iran, whether or not a monarchy would even be the right system for modern Iran, those are questions for another day. What matters right now is that his name has become a symbol of resistance against the Islamic Republic. Now, let us address something important. The regime still has tools at its disposal. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, remains a powerful and well-armed force. The Basij militia, which is essentially the regime's domestic enforcement arm, is still active. The regime controls the judiciary, the media, and the economy. It has shown in the past that it is willing to use extreme violence to survive. In November 2019, security forces killed over 1,500 protesters in just a few days. The regime has done it before, and it could try to do it again. But here is the crucial difference between now and then. In 2019, Iran's proxy network was still strong, Hezbollah was at full strength, Iran's missile program was intact and had not yet been significantly degraded. The regime could point to its regional power as a source of legitimacy and deterrence. Today, that is no longer the case. The regime is trying to project strength while simultaneously dealing with military setbacks, economic collapse, and internal protests. That is an extremely difficult position to be in. And history tells us that when authoritarian regimes face all three of these challenges at the same time, the outcomes are rarely good for the regime. There is also something happening within the IRGC itself that deserves attention. Multiple reports from human rights organizations, from journalists with sources inside Iran, and from intelligence assessments suggest that there is growing discontent even within the security apparatus. Not everyone in the IRGC is a true believer. Many of them joined because it was the only path to economic stability in a country with 40% unemployment among young men. When those individuals are ordered to fire on unarmed protesters, including students, women, and elderly people, not all of them will follow orders without hesitation. This is not to say that the IRGC is about to defect en masse, but cracks within the security forces are a critical early warning sign of regime instability, and those cracks appear to be forming. Let us also look at what is happening at the very top of the regime. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who has ruled Iran since 1989, is reportedly in poor health. He is in his mid-80s. The question of succession, who will lead Iran after Khamenei, has been a source of intense internal political rivalry for years. Different factions within the regime are positioning themselves. And when a regime's leadership is aging, sick, and surrounded by factional infighting, its ability to respond decisively to a crisis is severely compromised. The protests could not have come at a worse time for the Islamic Republic and could not have come at a better time for the Iranian people who want change. So, where does this go from here? There are several possible scenarios. In the first scenario, the regime manages to suppress the protests through a combination of mass arrests, internet shutdowns, and targeted violence. This is what happened in 2019 and 2022. It is possible. But as we have discussed, the conditions today are significantly different. In the second scenario, the protests continue to grow and the regime's ability to respond becomes increasingly constrained, either because of international pressure, because of fractures within the security forces, or because the economic situation makes it impossible to pay and equip the Basij effectively. In this scenario, we could see a negotiated transition or a sudden collapse. In the third scenario, and this is the one that nobody wants to talk about openly, the regime, feeling cornered and desperate, decides to escalate militarily. This could mean a direct confrontation with the United States or Israel, or it could mean attempting to accelerate its nuclear program as a deterrent. This scenario is extremely dangerous, not just for Iran, but for the entire region. What is clear is that Iran is at a historic crossroads. The decisions made by the regime, by the protesters, by the United States, and by Israel in the coming weeks and months will determine the future of one of the most strategically important countries in the world. For the Iranian people who are right now on the streets, risking their lives, risking imprisonment, risking everything, this is not about geopolitics. This is about their lives, their freedom, their future. They have been living under a system that has failed them economically, politically, and socially for nearly 5 decades. And they have decided that enough is enough. The world is watching Iran. And what happens there will reshape the Middle East for generations to come. If you have been following this story, you already know that what we are witnessing right now is not ordinary news. This is a turning point in history. And we will be here covering every development as it happens. So make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you never miss an update. Now tell us what you think. A, do you believe the Islamic Republic can survive this crisis? B, do you think the protests will lead to a real regime change this time? C, and do you think the United States and Israel will directly intervene if the situation escalates further? Drop your answer in the comments below. We read every single one.